Go this way. Oh, what up? What up? Oh, there we go. There we go. What's up with y'all? What's up? It wasn't nobody live, so I said let me jump on and see what's cooking. Right? Have a little what's up? Have a little midday discussion with everybody. You feel me? Is the camera still not frozen? We good? How we sound? Cause I'm in the car and I'm on my car audio. We Gucci. S Brush, what up? What up? Raymond, what up? West Africa, what's up? What's up with y'all? What y'all into for real? We can have a okay, we good. Ricardo, what's up? Um, I don't know, two things. I think it's one of my students. I had a event to take my students to today, right? And I think the event canceled. So I ain't got nothing to do until 3:30 until I go into the barbershop. American Dream, what's up? So yo, this morning, right? Check the move. This morning I had listened to the end of Unk's show from last night, right? Ain't nobody been live for real lately, the last couple of days, right? But I listened to the Unk's live from the other day, from last night. So I went back because all of this discussion is over UNESCO and what Dr. Diop did at UNESCO and whether what he put forth was accepted and um, you know, that so to say, right? It seems like the community is pretty much not sure what happened at UNESCO and they're not, it's not clear at what actually happened and what was the outcome of the UNESCO symposium and Dr. Diop and Dearfalo Banga, what they brought to the table, whether it was um, accepted by UNESCO. All right. So this morning when I woke up, I had read Diop and them wrote in volume 2 of the UNESCO joint, and that was and they wrote about the history, the early civilizations of Africa, right? That was their contribution, and they mainly focused in on Egypt and Nubia for the most part. So Unk had brought forth that the racialized hypothesis that Dr. Diop put forth wasn't accepted by UNESCO. So if you really want to feel a feel for what UNESCO, their aim and goal was for writing the general history of Africa, right? I think it was 8 volumes, right? I think it was like a 10-year project, right? It went from like 1966 to 1974, right? But it was a 10-year process, right? And they just took 2 years out to just do a periphery to see everything that they needed, right? To undertake such a monumental undertaking, right? Because this is the history of a whole continent, right? So it's not something that you can just gloss over, get a couple scholars together, right? And just throw it together. No, that wasn't what they did. All right. Um, they did reconnaissance, basically. They did 2 years, 2 whole years worth of research just compiling information, right? And one thing they say, uh, the conscious community has been said that that Dr. Diop brought a interdisciplinary approach to the study of Egypt. But if you read the first book of the UNESCO symposium, um, that was their aim from the outset, right? And I'm gonna get into reading a little bit of it if I can find it. But the introduction to the first book, I think everybody should read it, right? Because a lot of claims, get put on um, academia and the scientific community for being a white thing and being racist. One thing that I found out that the president and chairman of UNESCO um, General History of Africa was actually a black man. So a lot of the things we say go right out the door, you know what I mean? Because the chairman, the one who put the symposium, right, and the authors and the editors, everything of those 8 volumes together was actually a black African. So this guy, right, was a black African, and he was the chairman of the General History of Africa. So that goes to show you that UNESCO was serious about giving Africans a fair say in their own history. Not only that, it goes even deeper than that. This African gave Diop every chance in any scholastic circle, right, to make his point. He gave precedence, or UNESCO gave precedence to Africans off the gate. They made an African as the chairman of the General History of Africa. So he was leading the whole situation. And then this African, right, gave another African the most strenuous, right, and tedious part of the goddamn conference. So at every twist and helm of the conversation that was put forth, or the body of work that was put forth, it was Africans in the forefront. All right, that's what I didn't know. To even solidify the point, this next point that I'm about to make, right, which shows that Diop had the fairest of shake and even an advantage. Not only was the chairman a black African, that chairman and black African was from Senegal also, from the same country as Diop. So I don't want to hear no argument about Diop and Obanga and them not having a fair shake at the conference. They brought the most work of any other scholar that came to the goddamn conference. They was given tissue samples. They was given tissue samples of mummies. The collection of archives, every manuscript that they could ask for was flown into them, right? Everything was given to them. So let's get into this. My bad, y'all. How's everybody doing today? I apologize. I think I already spoke. American Dream, what's up? What's up? Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Right. So Diop and them was given everything affordable, right? In any language that they needed a manuscript translated out of, they had it, right? They had access to world libraries and research centers, right? Um, and they had a couple years to put forth their claim. So I think they had a fair shake. But let me get into this. It messed me up, right? When I was looking for when I was looking for who was the chairman, and when it popped up that he was a black guy from Senegal, right? I'm like, man, there's no excuse at this point, right? I hope my iPad don't die. All right, we're gonna put in. I mean, y'all gotta read, and every volume of the General History of Africa, you can read it right online. Um, you just put in the General History of Africa, put in the volume that you want. I think it's 8 volumes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the whole PDF book will pop up on any device that you have that's connected to the internet. All right. It works in Bing. It works in Google. It works in Safari. It works in Chrome. It works in Firefox. It works on Internet Explorer, right? They are the main web browsers that everybody use. And on every web browser, the PDF is available for reading, all 8 books, all right? So don't let people who hit the live button feel like they have a up on y'all with these manuscripts and stuff. It is all out there for everybody. Y'all can go read it yourselves. Y'all don't have to depend on me. You don't have to depend on Reggie. You don't have to depend on Smash or Garfield or Unk. Um, Nobody. You can go get these manuscripts, right? And you don't have to go buy big books like Unk do and clutter your house and wait for. You can get these books, most of them in PDF form, right? So you can look at them right on your book, right on your phone. A lot of these resources that I be reading be free. So even if your pockets are not, able at this time to purchase these documents and stuff, most of the time you can find them for free. So nobody does not have to be behind the conversation. Nobody has to worry about waiting for us to drop information. You can go get all of this information yourself. None of this stuff is hidden, and none of it is $1 million, and unattainable financially. All right. All right, let's look at book one. I'm gonna read. I'm waiting for this book to come up. Yeah, y'all, the introduction is where it's at. Yo, I hope I don't got work today. Yo, they setting up over here. So look, y'all, what we do is um the institution that I work for, right? Um, I work for a cosmetology school. I'm a senior barber instructor. And we partner with different groups around the Baltimore DC area that do outreach. So like certain clinics will do free healthcare screenings to underprivileged communities. Um, and when they do that, they partner with the cosmetology school and we'll bring students out here to give free haircuts, free manicures, right? Just as a give back. So today was one of our days where we partnered with this company called Live Chair Health. And we were supposed to be out here at 11 o'clock cutting hair for anybody who got a free health screening, right? Because, in a lot of underprivileged communities, the healthcare is bad. So you want to catch people before, they have to go to the emergency room to see if they have any underlying ailments. That's the biggest part, of healthcare that's an issue in underprivileged communities. People don't have primary doctors. So it's companies like this that come out and try to give free health screenings and let people know that look, your blood pressure might be a little high. You might want to go see a doctor. Do you have any history of diabetes or anything in your family? You know what I mean? Any history of heart disease, stuff like that, because most of these people don't talk to any healthcare professionals until their life is on the line and they getting rushed to the emergency room in an ambulance or something, right? So the company that I work for just try to come out, with these different clinics and, at least give free haircuts and manicures. And you dig what I'm saying? A female might, need her hair braided or, let the kids come and get free haircuts in these underprivileged communities. So I like doing it. But anyway, today, I think the time was off. So the students were supposed to be here at 11 o'clock. And when they got here, was nobody here. And the event didn't start till 1 o'clock. So most of the students left and went back to school. Some of them went home. So I'm just sitting out here making sure no other students don't show up. All right, let's get into the introduction of the general history of Africa. Yo, I only got 8% on my iPad, yo. I hope I can get through it. What up, Tuck? Yeah, I'm early today, y'all. Listen, it wasn't nobody live, so I said let me jump on. You know what I mean? But I'm about to read the introduction of the first book of the general history of Africa. Before my iPad died, I should have charged it up. Hold on. All right, this is the introduction, right? And this is written by the director in general of UNESCO. And his name is Amadou Mukhtar Embo, right? Amadou Mukhtar Embo, right? Now, this is the director general. I'm going to say that again. This is the director general of UNESCO. And he was a black man from Senegal. I'm telling y'all, Diop and them got the fairest shape possible. The fairest shape possible. All right. Introduction. Mukhtar says, for a long time, all kinds of myths and prejudices concealed the true history of Africa from the world at large. African societies were looked upon as societies that could have no history. In spite of important work done by such pioneers as Leo Frobenius, Maurice Delphos, and Arturo Liberala, as early as the first decades of this century. Which century? The 20th century, right? A great many non-African experts could not rid themselves of certain preconceptions and agreed that the lack of written sources and documents made it impossible to engage in any scientific study of such societies. Okay, so this African Mukhtar, the director of UNESCO, is saying that basically Europeans felt as though that there could be no real scholastic study of Africa and African history because most of African history below the Sahara was plagued by, how do I say it, illiterate societies. So white people or Europeans, I gotta stop using that. European scholars approached Africa as something that could only be learned through archaeology, and they felt as though it wasn't that much archaeology. So they did very little digs and stuff in sub-Saharan Africa, right? Because of their preconceived notions that these societies didn't ever accomplish anything because most of them were pre-literate societies. All right. He says, although the Iliad and Odyssey were rightly regarded as essential sources for the history of ancient Greece, African oral tradition, the collective memory of peoples which holds the thread of many events marking their lives, was rejected as worthless. So he's basically saying that a lot of sub-Saharan Africa, right, put their traditions not in writing, but they put it in oral tradition, right? They recorded their history from person to person orally. The European scholars felt as though that oral tradition wasn't as valuable as a written tradition. All right. Okay. Where was I at? In writing the history, a large part of Africa, the only source used were from outside the continent, and the final product gave a picture not so much of the paths actually taken by the African peoples as of those that the authors thought they must have taken. All right. African peoples as of those that the authors thought they must have taken. Right. Since the European Middle Ages were often used as a yardstick modes of production, social relations, and political institutions were visualized only by reference to the European past. So it was saying basically that the scholars was only looking at Africa, right, in the historical aspect, and only in a way that it could be viewed through the European lens, right? So Africa could only be talked about, right, in ancient times, if you were reading only ancient Greek or European sources, right? So basically, European sources had took precedence over African oral tradition, right? So the history of Africa or ancient Africa wasn't being told by the African. It was only being told by the European, right? And their brief encounters or writings of Africa. So it will be the Roman, the Roman accounts of Africa was took as as having more weight over African oral tradition. Greek sources from ancient Greek writers, right, was taken as, and then the colonial writings and then they used the Arabic sources, right, and then the colonial period. During the colonial period, when they started writing about Africa, so only those sources was taken as history for Africa, right? And it was always through the lens of Europeans and Arabs, all right? So Mukhtar is cooking right now, right? Then he says, furthermore, the continent of Africa was hardly ever looked upon as a historical entity. On the contrary, emphasis was laid on everything likely to lend credence to the idea that a split had existed from time immemorial between a white Africa and a black Africa, each unaware of its other's existence. All right. We didn't have this conversation in over the past couple years, right? It says the Sahara was often presented as an impenetrable space, preventing any intermingling of ethnic groups and peoples or any exchange of goods, beliefs, customs, ideas between the societies that had grown up on either side of the desert. Hermetic frontiers were drawn between the civilizations of ancient Egypt and Nubia and those of the people south of the Sahara. It is true that the history of Africa north of the Sahara has been more closely linked with that of the Mediterranean basin than has the history of sub-Saharan Africa. But it is now widely recognized that the various civilizations of the African continent, for all their differing languages and cultures, represent to a greater or lesser degree the historical offshoots of a set of peoples and societies united by bonds centuries old. Okay? Another phenomenon which did great disservice to the objective study of the African past was the appearance with the slave trade and colonization of racial stereotypes, which bred contempt and lack of understanding and became so deep rooted that they distorted even the basic concepts of historiography. All right? So when Unc is deploying people to leave the racial aspect alone, right? And how much strife is caused in the history of Africa or understanding the African continent. Here is the African, right? The African guy from Senegal is echoing, and the director of UNESCO is echoing the same things, right? That Unc was echoing or saying last night. This is where Diop went wrong. This is where Diop went wrong, right? And we'll see that it was other Africans who were telling Diop and them that that racial model can only do a disservice to understanding the history of Africa in totality, because it's narrow and rigid. And everybody in Africa do not fit those narrow, rigid racial stereotypes. The world is bigger than just black and white. Even if you choose to use black and white, it doesn't mean that the whole world fits into that rigid stereotype of black and white. Me and Corey argued this for years. For the last 2 years, me and Corey have been arguing this point. That even if you use the rigid racial model, North Africa can still be excluded out of the rigid black or the rigid white. So when they say the Egyptians was neither black nor white, the majority of the world is neither black nor white. I don't know why that's hard. I'm saying if you choose to use the outdated racial model, the thing is, if we use the unscientific, right? If we use the outdated unscientific racial model, Egypt is still not what y'all think it is. So even if we use the outdated unscientific racial model, which y'all saying people can't do no more, right? I still stand on a position that if you choose to use the outdated racial model, then you still lose, because the Egyptians are neither black nor white. They don't fit into those rigid racial standards. Jesus Christ. I don't know why we find that so hard to understand. I don't know why people act like it's so hard to explain that. I don't know why we're acting like that is such a hard thing to grasp. Y'all know what people think of as race. Y'all understand that social construct. Y'all understand the morphology that is explained through these rigid models, right? So explain that properly. We're not saying that race is real. We're saying that even if you use race, the Egyptians does not fit into the Negroid category of that outdated racial model. That's all I've been saying. Y'all can have fun with everything else. All right. Let's listen. Let's continue to listen to the director of UNESCO, the Black African Senegalese scholar, Mukhtar Imbo. All right. He give a good take on us in the West, though. Wait till we get to that. That was the most powerful part right there for me. All right. Hold on. Let me see what y'all talking about. Let me see. Let's see. Let me see. Are y'all still in the building? I'm reading the introduction, y'all, to the General History of Africa, Book 1. All right. All right, here we go. Only got 6%, y'all. Let's get through this. All right. Like the show, man. Like the show. If y'all don't like the show, just subscribe, man. I gotta get the 500 followers, man. We gotta get the 500 subs, man. Come on now. Come on now, man. We making this way harder than what it's supposed to be, man. I'm not even asking for 1,000. I want to get the 500. Right? All right. It says another phenomenon which did great disservice to the objective study of the African past was the appearance with the slave trade and colonization of racial stereotypes which bred contempt and lack of understanding and became so deep rooted that they distorted even the basic concepts of historiography. From the time when the notions of white and black were used as generic labels by the, the colonists, right, who were regarded as superior, the colonized Africans had to struggle against both economic and physiological, psychological enslavement. Hey, yo, crazy. Yeah. Yo, this guy's a riot, y'all. I swear. Oh, shit. All right. My bad, y'all. All right. It says that Africans had to struggle against both economic and psychological enslavement. All right. All right. Africans were identifiable by the color of their skin. They had only got 5%, y'all. Come on. They had become a kind of merchandise. They were earmarked for hard labor, and eventually, in the minds of those dominating them, they came to symbolize an imaginary and allegedly inferior Negro race. This pattern of spurious identification relegated the history of the African peoples in many minds to the rank of ethno-history, in which appreciation of the historical and cultural facts were bound to be warped. That is a deep saying right there. Yo, we need to pick that apart. He said that that the African, right, the black African was put into an inferior Negro race, right? He's not calling them Negro. He's saying that this is what the colonizers put on these people, right? The racial category of Negro race. And then he says that this pattern of spurious identification relegated the history of the African peoples in many minds to the rank of ethno-history, in which appreciation of the historical and cultural facts were bound to be warped, right? So he's saying once you put that racial category of Negro, right, that had the connotation of being a laborer or a slave onto a people, then their history, right, and what they actually brought to the table as human beings, right, was warped, twisted, disfigured from its original look. It is warped. So history, right, when you use racial connotations, you warp, right, the history of those people into something unrecognizable. Dr. John Henry Clark used to say that. Dr. John Henry Clark said that Africans, right, sub-Saharan Africans, right, Western Central Africans, Sub-Saharan Africans, however you want to classify it, right? He said that we were taken out of the respectful commentary of history. This Senegalese director of UNESCO is saying the same thing. He said that now, when you use those racialized terms, right, that have a connotation of slavery and everything else on it, i.e., Negro and Negroid, right? Now, the history of Africa and those people are warped, it's changed. Let's get it. He says the situation has changed significantly since the Second World War, and in particular since the African countries became independent and began to take an active part in the life of the international community and in the mutual exchanges that are and as has risen. An increasing number of historians has endeavored to tackle the study of Africa with a more rigorous, objective, and open-minded outlook by using, with all due precautions, actual African sources. All right? In exercising their right to take the historical initiative, Africans themselves have felt a deep-seated need to reestablish the historical authenticity of their societies on solid foundations. In this context, the importance of the 8-volume General History of Africa, which UNESCO is publishing, it speaks for itself. All right? The experts from many countries working on this project begin by laying down the theoretical and methodological basis for the history. Oh, now we about to start cooking, right? They had to lay a framework, right? Now, they wanted this framework, this general history of Africa, to be the overall prevailing history of Africa, to be disseminated throughout the whole world, right? This was supposed to be the biggest undertaking of writing the history of Africa, right? And this was supposed to be translated into, every language and school curriculums, right? In all countries was supposed to use this as the theoretical framework to write when you teach the history of Africa, right? This was supposed to be the main resource for it. So this was a huge undertaking. Hold on, let me see where y'all at. Y'all only got a little bit of time left. That's a fact. The people from the steeps, man, look, I would love to do more history on that. All right, let's finish this up, y'all. I didn't make the same stuff. Please don't start playing this bullshit. All right. The experts from many countries working on this project begin by laying down the theoretical and methodological basis for the history. They have been at pains to call in question the oversimplifications arising from a linear and restrictive concept of world history, and to reestablish the true facts wherever necessary and possible. They have endeavored to highlight the historical data that give a clear picture of the evolution of the different peoples of Africa and their specific social cultural setting. To tackle this huge task, make all the more complex and difficult by the vast range of sources and the fact that documents were widely scattered, UNESCO has had to proceed by stages. The first stage, from 1965 to 1969, was devoted to gathering documentation and planning the work. Operational assignments were conducted in the field and included campaigns to collect oral traditions, the creation of regional documentation, centers for oral traditions, the collection of unpublished manuscripts in Arabic and Ajami, African languages written in Arabic script, the compilation of archival inventories, and the preparation of the guide to the sources of the history of Africa, culled from archives and libraries of the countries of Europe, and later published in 9 volumes, right? So they collected all of the data for the researchers, right? And they collected it in 9 volumes and disseminated, right? So Diop and them had the oral traditions of Africa. Yo, they had everything to tell a story. And they spent all their fucking time talking about Egypt. Horrible. The second stage, which lasted from 1969 to 1971, was devoted to shaping the history and linking its different parts. The purpose of the international meeting of experts held in Paris in 1969 and Addis Ababa, I guess that's in Ethiopia, in 1970 was to study and define the problems involved in drafting and publishing the history, presentation in 8 volumes, the principal edition in English, French, and Arabic, translation into African language such as Kiswahili, Hausa, Fulani, Yoruba, and Lingala, perspective versions in German, Russian, Portuguese, Spanish, and Chinese, as well as abridged editions designed for a wide African and international public. The third stage was involved actually drafting the publication. This began with the appointment of the 39-member International Scientific Committee, 2/3 African and 1/3 non-African, which assumes intellectual responsibility for the history. All right. So they had a whole. So out of the whole, right, they divided the whole into 3 parts. All right. Let's do the pie chart, y'all. Let's do the pie chart. All right. You make the pie. The pie is the whole. You split the pie into 3 parts. All right. So you got 1, 2, 3 parts of the pie. You take 1 part of the pie, right, is everybody else. And then you leave the other 2 parts, right, which is the majority, is what? Africans. So the majority of the scholars that work, right, on this, on the general history of Africa was Africans. Everybody else, white, Asian, whatever, non-African, all of those people was 1/3 was other. All right. So they gave precedence to Africans to write their own history. All right. The method used, listen to this. The method used is interdisciplinary and is based on a multifaceted approach and a wide variety of sources. Interdisciplinary, right? UNESCO already said that they was going to use interdisciplinary approach to this, all right? It says in a wide variety of sources, all right? The first among these is archaeology, which holds many of the keys to the history of African cultures and civilizations, all right? Thanks to archaeology, it is now acknowledged that Africa was very probably the cradle of mankind and the scene in the Neolithic period of one of the first technological revolutions in history. Archaeology has also shown that Egypt was the setting for one of the most brilliant ancient civilizations of the world. But another very important source is oral tradition, which, after being long despised, has now emerged as an invaluable instrument for discovering the history of Africa, making it possible to follow the movements of its different people in both space and time, to understand the African vision of the world from the inside and to grasp the original features of the values on which the cultures and the institutions of the continent are based. We are indebted to the International Scientific Committee in charge of the general history of Africa and to its repertoire of the editors and authors of the various volumes and chapters for having shed a new light on the African past in its authentic and all-encompassing form, and for having avoided any dogmatism in the study of essential issues. Among these issues we might cite, this is where he get into us at, right here. I love how he did this. This was brilliant. All right. He's starting to talk about the issues in the other African people, right? He says, among these issues, we might cite the slave trade. All right. That endlessly bleeding wound, which was responsible for one of the cruelest mass deportations in the history of mankind, which sapped the African continent of its lifeblood while contributing significantly to the economic and commercial expansion of Europe. Colonization, with all the effects it had on population economics, psychology, and culture, relations between Africa, south of the Sahara, and the Arab world, and finally, the process of decolonization and nation building, which mobilized the intelligence and passion of people still alive and sometimes still active today. All these issues, yo, my fucking iPad about to die. God damn it. Shit. All right, all these issues have been broached with a concern for honesty and rigor, which is not the least of the history's merit. By taking stock of our knowledge of Africa, putting forward a variety of viewpoints on African cultures, and offering a new reading of history, the history has the single advantage of showing up the light side, the light shade, and of opening, portraying the differences of opinions that may exist between scholars, right? by demonstrating the inadequacy of the methodological approaches which have long been used in research on Africa, has this history calls for a new and careful study on the twofold problem areas of historiography and cultural identity, which are united by links of reciprocity. All right, my iPad just died, y'all. So what is he saying? What is Mukhtar saying? I really wanted to get into how he started talking about how the people who was moved in the slave trade in the West represent an African population also, and that our story should have been included in that general history of Africa. And he was talking about how the Africans that was moved off of the continent forcibly by the slave trade, right, also took Africa into the Western Hemisphere. Oh, y'all got to read that. So he was saying how the fights that the Africans abroad fought, they were actually having an African fight abroad, and it's still a part of the African story. It just took place in the Western Hemisphere under slavery and Jim Crow and colonization. And he talks about from the tip of Canada all the way to the tip of Brazil in South America and across the Caribbean. Mukhtar did an excellent job in pointing that out in the general history of Africa, just in the introduction. Man, I could die. God dang. Let me see if I can put the link. Hold on. Let me see if I can put the link in before my shit die. I wanted to finish reading that. Damn it. Oh, hold on, y'all.